All right. We are live. Hello, YouTube. As always, we're about to record our Nerdosphere podcast. We will not interact with the chat until the end. If there's something to interact with that we feel like we want to bring up, we'll do it at the end. But feel free to watch and chat along. Hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Nerdosphere. I'm one of your hosts, Clayton, joined as always by the biggest palate this side of the Mississippi, Sassy Pants Corbin.
Hey, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
What you doing?
Hey, man, yeah, it's right. Isn't it? Isn't it right?
It's right, yeah.
Isn't it right?
It's right.
Hey, right. I've got my. I gave a cup of coffee here from London. Oh wait, no, just from Boston. Never mind.
Just want to know why your voice has changed like 8 times in that sentence.
Don't worry about it.
Why the fuck does it matter to you, Jesse? About how many times my voice changes?
It changes as much as I want it to, and not a penny less.
Needs to. Yes. Some people say penny for your thoughts, and then sometimes they give me the penny back.
Change, so just don't worry about change, okay?
Yes, we'd like some vodka. A little bit of a high noon, and then just throw it back and just don't call me a slave.
Yes.
I mean, vodka is good. I can get behind that.
As you may have heard, we're joined again tonight by our fellow Nerdosphere host, Jesse. Welcome back, buddy.
James. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. It's Jesse and James.
Prepare for trouble.
Yep. I had already forgot again. I'm so awesome at remembering those things, you know?
It's funny. I thought to myself, I was wondering if you were going to remember. I was like, is he going to introduce me as Jesse and James or Jesse James? I was not quite sure, but
neither.
You forgot, so thanks a lot.
Again.
For normal chit chat, I have something that's a little not normal to bring up because I think it's fascinating.
I think this is a normal for you, so I think you are. This is normal. You have odd things to talk about all the time.
For those who are curious, Tim is under the weather, so that's why he's not here today.
I forgot there are some people who show up for that voice.
Yeah, so sorry, Tim stands. He's not here.
But he's watching My Hero Academia, which is huge.
He is watching My Hero Academia, and he's
on his
actually
own.
Enjoying it. Yeah, we forced it down his throat on our little Nerdosphere retreat that we did this weekend, and
we got him to episode 12, which that was the goal. I was like, this weekend can't end until there's the altercation between All Might and the Nomu. And I was like, because right after that is immediately the sports festival, and if you're not invested at those two junctures, you just won't like the show. I can admit that if you can't get into it by that point, then you should just walk away. So we got him to the Nomu. He went home and watched the sports festival and was like, dude, the fight between Deku and Todoroki was fucking awesome. And I was like, welcome, child.
Welcome.
Yeah, you did pick 2 good ones. That first fight with All Might and the Nomu, and then the sports festival is on point. Even the trials up through the sports festival is pretty awesome as well.
I also can say that if it weren't for us pushing him, knowing Tim and seeing how he was reacting to the show, he would have dipped early on because Deku is such a little bitch.
Yeah.
Like I almost guarantee he would not have made it to the 4th episode if we were like, hey, watch this show. And he tried it on his own. He'd be like, listen, I gave it a try and it's just not for me. And I respect the fact that you
and not to tease too much, because I don't think you're joining us, Clayton, and I don't think you've seen the movies anyways, but it was the one thing I was worried about with the Evangelion movie that I had you watch is Shinji's a really hard protagonist to get behind.
Oh, I was braced to talk about it, and Clayton's gonna be on that episode.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I am, and I did watch it, and we'll save it. We'll save it.
Save it for the next episode.
I wanted to tease it. I wanted to tease it because we're jumping into it very quickly after this. So you said a whiny bitch or whatever.
Tease it
and I was
for
like,
our Nerdosphere only podcast hosts. If you like anime, go check out Anime Ultra. We're talking about Evangelion. the first movie. And my tease is, if you think Deko's a bitch,
Yeah,
go check out Shinji.
Wait until you meet
Yep.
Shinji.
Shinji
At least
Ikari.
Deku like toughens up pretty quick, and has some character development. Oh god.
All right. Anyways, saving that secret sauce for that podcast. So what I wanted to bring forth to the table is, like I said, it's something that's interesting. We don't ever talk about this kind of shit, but it enthralled me today, and that is the missing persons case of Gabby Petito, which has been taking the social medias by storm the past couple of days. And basically, the gist of it is like her and her boyfriend, who she identified as her fiance, live in Central Florida, and they went on this long, like, cross-country road trip. And like every step of the way, she was documenting like where they were, uploading like Instagram blogs and shit, and would also like send photos to like her mom. Her parents are divorced, and she would like call her dad most of the time. And they the fiance ended up back in Central Florida, and it had been back for 10 days and no Gabby.
Weird.
And he is refusing to help the FBI and has lawyered up. And she's just gone.
I don't know how I haven't heard of this.
I haven't either. So I question the social media blow up that Corbin has insinuated, but it's definitely weird.
There was an update today where allegedly there was a police report filed somewhere that he said that Gabby tried to slap him for some reason. And that was it. And so that brought me to this. So obviously the assumed scenario is he done killed her and left her in Yellowstone, which is where they were last, But is it possible, since we're so early in on everything and we're being speculative, what if it was something as if he was like, I had enough of your nonsense, and then just left her? Haven't we all been there with someone where we're like, you know what? You're walking back 40 states.
Well, I think the issue that I have with that is because, yes, that would be something that I think you could assume might have happened, but like, how has she not talked to anyone? Like, that seems odd.
I will answer that for you and turn this back into a nerdy discussion. There is a conspiracy theory that the National Park Service was actually established to cover entrances to a massive underground cave system that is home to what some cultures call Wendigos. And there are tens of dozens of people that go missing without a trace every year in national parks. No trace. Gone. Wendigos.
So, but like,
he got mad. He leaves. She gets attacked because she's by herself. Eaten. Dragged into an underground cave system. Wendigos devour her. Now he is being blamed for her disappearance. Movie. Go.
It is one of those things where, like, I love watching crime shit on like all the things. And obviously murders are sometimes really stupid, but it just seems particularly dumb that if he was responsible for killing this girl who was already, and he knew because he was in the videos, uploading shit every day, to then just like go home and exist for 10 days and then like not say anything, like not even have like a bogus lie or an alibi. You're just going to go back to living your life like nothing happened. Like, that's just so strange.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like if he was trying to murder her and get away with it, that he did it the correct way, where you'd want to establish some sort of alibi. You wouldn't want to just go back to your hometown and go back to living your life. But at the same time, we all also know that people sometimes snap and do rash things. And maybe he was like, I just want to get a couple of normal days in before my life is flipped upside down and I go to jail.
That also could be it. He just wanted to see like what was going on with My Hero, catch up on the latest chapters of the manga. Found out that the creator said he was taking a break, and he was like, "Well, now it's double fucked. There's no new chapters to read, and I murdered my fiance." Now that could be a nerd tea. It could be our version of O.J. Simpson's book, where we'll tell you how to get away with murder. These are the steps you need to do if you plan on doing the deed.
Well, one of his steps is correct. Murder people in a National Park Service, because there's a huge legal loophole.
What do you mean?
That has to do with national parks.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Isn't it something with like jurisdiction is kind of up in the air in national parks?
Jurisdiction is super wonky, so if you kill somebody and hide them in a national park, it is very unlikely that they will ever be discovered.
Is that why maybe he doesn't feel the pressure to help the FBI? Because he was like, you have no jurisdiction, even though it's cross state lines.
I don't know.
I mean, and it also could be something along the lines of, let's be honest, if he did kill her and left her body out in the wilderness, it could be eaten by a bear and you'd never find it anyways. Or a mountain lion.
Or like a Wendigo.
Or a Wendigo. Yeah, it could just be drug underground and killed or eaten by a Wendigo.
Exactly. Yep.
That makes more sense. So I'm gonna go with that theory. Heard it here first, folks. She was eaten by a Wendigo.
Hell yeah. It's one of those things where it pops up. I find myself always conflicted in situations like this, where like I understand it's real life and it's happening to someone, and I can empathize with that. My heart goes out to the family. I can only imagine what they're going through. But also the other part of me is like, I cannot wait for this HBO documentary.
About the Wendigo or about the murdered person?
Oh, about the murdered person.
That's fair.
If you're gonna watch Wendigo, it's gonna be on the History Channel.
Oh, that's fair. I think there's actually a movie called The Wendigo.
I think there is too.
It's probably I'm sure that it is. Wendigos are creepy, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Skinwalkers are creepy.
I don't know if I know what that is.
It's basically a Wendigo.
Is it? It's they basically like they will like walk around to mimic human movement, and they'll mimic voices, and so like they'll lure campers out by basically like anytime you're like kind of in the middle of the woods or anywhere where you believe you're secluded, if you hear someone yelling for help, it's basically a skinwalker or a Wendigo.
They're gonna kill you. So
like they're luring you out into
just like that creature in Made in Abyss.
Oh yeah. I'm never going out. I'm never going camping again, especially not in a national park.
After this conversation,
after this conversation, I'll just never go
quick
camping.
Google
again.
Search and yep,
maybe
I'm done.
Clayton, you and I have always talked about how we watch things like Ghost Hunters and stuff, and like we're one amongst millions where we're like, we could do that and it'd be entertaining. We can do the national park version where you and I can go to all the national parks and see if it's possible to get lost and eaten by a Wendigo.
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll research all the people who went missing in each park, and we'll try to follow their footsteps and try to see if there's a common denominator between all the things. We'll vlog it, we'll live stream it, so that way when we go missing, you know exactly when we've gone missing. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll call it via the live stream.
We'll call it Boys in the Wood.
Boys in the Wood.
Boys
Perfect.
in the Woods.
All right.
Yes.
Well, if you didn't know, this is their Nerdosphere. We're a podcast that discusses everything from the big screen to the small screen and anything in between, whether it be a show, a movie, a book, or a music. If you can nerd out about it,
around forever, huh?
Yeah. If you can nerd out about it, we're going to talk about it. And tonight, we're going to be discussing new horror film from horror film director James Wann. You may know him from the Conjuring film series, but he brings us a new take on horror.
Hang on.
Malignant. What?
I know you like to pronounce things funnily, but it is important to note that James Wann is not a Hispanic director. It is James Wann.
James
with the W.
Wann.
W-A-N.
Yes.
Is it James Wann?
James Wann.
Is that like the knockoff, like the Bollywood James Bond equivalent? Like James Wann.
And I am James Wann.
Yeah, so this movie has redefined horror. My quick snippet that I think it has done as far as redefining horror is that It has done something no horror film has ever been bold enough to do, and that is to break down on a molecular structure the plot of how a movie is formed. And they've ripped away the narrative. And so now, instead of being scared of what's happening in the story, you're scared by how uneasy you feel by the lack of story. It's like when Gabe shows that really disturbing video montage, and he's like, this is the new age of horror, the age of the unsettling, and it's just a bunch of stuff that just makes you uneasy. That's what this is. This is Malignant.
Oh, Gabe from The Office. I got you.
I know it took me a second to follow along with that. I was like, what Gabe? And then I realized he was talking about The Office. It makes sense now.
Why don't you ever follow along?
I try, but you're all over the place. So kind of like the cave system under the national parks that kill people via Wendigo.
Goes across the whole country.
My doctor doesn't believe in ADD medication, so I'm just unsubscribed.
Well, Jesse, what were your general overview thoughts of the movie?
So just to kind of give you a starting point on where my expectations were when I came into this movie, is I was actually pretty excited because I enjoy The Conjuring. I think they're extremely fun movies. I think they're well done. And this one was a little bit, so it was a letdown. I'm not going to get around it and say a little bit. To put it in perspective, that first scene in the movie when they're in like the psych ward or whatever it is that you want to call it, and the people are getting killed in the room, and then they get drug off, or the body gets drug off, and you see like the rabbit socks, and then they show you essentially this evil creature, and they're talking about cutting the cancer out. I legitimately thought we were going to have one of those moments where you were going to see this, and then it was going to pan to real time in regards to the characters were watching a cheesy B film on actual television. And then we were going to pick this up. Like, I thought it was that laughable in the beginning that I expected to, like, fully expected to pan off of a TV that the main characters were watching and be like, okay, that's actually kind of funny. That's a really interesting introduction. And then you find out that that was real and meant something. And I was like, why the fuck am I watching this? Like, within the first like 2 or 3 minutes was completely, it just didn't, I didn't care about, I just didn't really care about the characters either. Like, there's this weird attachment where you like immediately introduced to an abusive boyfriend, and obviously didn't care about him, but then you also didn't care about the main chick because you don't have any attachment to them either, at least in the beginning. It was just weird. I felt like the pacing was a little bit odd throughout the whole thing, and I felt like it was almost a little bit forced, and I wasn't in the least bit freaked out by any of the movie. Like, there was nothing in it that gave me a jump. There was nothing in it that kind of spooked me. So it was a big letdown for me in regards to what James Wann has done in the past. It was a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah.
I think my nonsensical summary does the movie more justice than the actual movie does. And I said Malignant is like if when Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, the yolk that came out was an evil version that tried to kill all the king's horses and all the king's men. And then there was a piece of bacon that Humpty Dumpty was siblings with. And when he told him it was adopted, Bacon was shocked.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It's I don't know. Are we trying to avoid spoilers? We probably are, aren't we? For the most part, are we okay spoiling stuff? I don't know.
At this point, so before we get into spoilers, we can go over like the general reception, because I think that's going to say a lot about the movie. And then we can get into spoilers. We'll give a spoiler warning, because I think in order to truly talk about how bad this movie is, we need to spoil it. So
I agree.
What are your thoughts, Clayton? We said our piece.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much different. Like, Jesse made a really good couple points that I didn't bring up at all in our initial conversations about it, but this movie was not scary. There was no bit of it that was freaky. There was no bit of it that was tense. There was no bit that even, like, there were no cheap jump scares that got me. Like, there was nothing in this movie. The acting was bad. The dialogue was bad. I felt like I was watching a made-for-CW movie. When it was over, Tim, who's not here tonight, had fallen asleep like right as this movie started. And the next morning he was like, "So how was it?" And I was like, "Man, that may be the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. It was that bad."
Yeah,
So,
you can't even say it's campy too because it wasn't self-aware enough.
right, yeah,
You know what I mean? Like it was
unself-aware camp. You're exactly right. So,
Yeah,
and not
and
in a good way at all.
That's what shocked me so much. Was I was like, if they'd gone that way with it, it would have been a fun movie. I would have been like, okay, this is fun. It's a plot you like, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but at least you feel like it's maybe a tribute to the old style horror campy films. And it just wasn't even that. You're like,
Yeah.
it was, they were trying to be serious with a film that had no right to be considered a horror film. Like it was
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. It was odd to me.
Yeah, another thing that I saw some people praising, some critics praising, was the gore. They said the gore was. I saw a couple different reviews that said the gore was good, the kills were good, and I didn't think that at all. Like it was super lame. and
Agreed.
and I mean, I'm not like one for gore, but the gore in this was like CGI, and it wasn't that good. Like I don't.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
I think the only thing from this movie that I took away, and I was like, I would like to see this maybe done again in a movie that is good, was the over the head shot when they're running up the stairs and stuff through the house, and you can see the entire floor plan.
That was a very
cool
cinematic shot. Yes,
that was cool,
Very
and that
cool.
was inventive and imaginative. But man, the fact that you put that in this trash heap of a shit pile.
Yeah. And I mean, again, yeah, the filmography part of it was actually pretty impressive at times with that overhead view and the weird like melting of reality that they did between certain scenes. Was, I mean, it was visually cool. But yeah, it fell flat on every aspect of a horror film for me, and that's the disappointment.
When you're watching a movie that makes you realize that the cops in a Saw film are more realistic cops than what are in your film, you know you done fucked up. Because I was watching these cops and I was like, what is this? Like, what? You're not even trying. Like,
yeah.
And to put it in perspective, if anybody doesn't know, or maybe not perspective, maybe that's the wrong word, to kind of update anybody, James Wann was actually the director of Saw. So that was a little shout out to some of the first stuff that he did there. So I think he only did Saw 1. So I don't know if he was, I think he directed Saw 1 and that was it. I don't think I think he helped write the others. Yeah. But I don't think he directed any other than the first Saw.
But Clayton, you got numbers, right, dog?
I do got numbers. So let's start with Rotten Tomatoes, which, depending on the argument we use or don't use, but so it actually has a 77 from reviewers.
Stop.
I know.
Stop.
It's not
but
good.
It only has a 52 with audience, which is spoily. The popcorn ball has spilled. So the audience, for the most part, didn't really like it. As far as the box office goes, so this will kind of tie into our overarching storyline that we keep coming back to, which is box office performance, especially with movies that release same day on a streaming platform. And this one released on HBO Max same day. It's one of the movies that one of the many movies that's releasing same day to HBO Max. And in the box office, domestic, it only made 5.4 million, 9.3 international. So it's only at $14.7 million in the box office, and it's 5 days out from release. So that is dog shit. It's terrible. And unfortunately for Malignant, so are the numbers for HBO Max. It has only been streamed. This article was updated yesterday. It's only been streamed 753,000 times on HBO Max. And to put that in perspective, Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, the newest Conjuring, was viewed by 1.6 million households opening weekend. So it's down way far from that one. Mortal Kombat was 5.5 million households. So I think that's their most successful one so far. Because we commented on Suicide Squad did worse than Mortal Kombat. So
yeah.
So yeah, that's not a lot of people, guys. That's not a lot of people.
So do you guys, and maybe there's like stats on how this actually works. Do they like sign an agreement? Do either of you know with HBO Max? So like Malignant or James Wann, whoever is in contact with HBO to do the release at the box office and on HBO Max. Do you know, is it done? Are they getting paid by the play, like click-through rate, essentially, for lack of a better term, or do they like sign a contract to have it exclusively air on there? Did like HBO Max pay them? Do you know?
So HBO Max and Warner Brothers is the same company that's owned by AT&T.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what I thought. I had done a little bit of research. I just couldn't find numbers.
Yeah. And when they announced the HBO Max pivot of same-day releases, it did cause quite a bit of stir, because all of the contracts for the movies that are released in HBO Max were all written with back-end profits being made on the box office. That's why Legendary, Legendary, because they do Godzilla, actually filed a lawsuit against HBO Max because they were expecting an estimated return on the movie, and then Warner Brothers settled. That's why Christopher Nolan is making his next movie with Universal.
Yep, he bounced.
He said, "I'm not doing this." And the Black Widow lawsuit will definitely be the proponent moving forward that is going to cause the biggest shakeup in Hollywood. People need to realize that contracts are not written for this just case scenario, and so you won't get your payday. And that's why the Russo brothers were like, we're not going to negotiate to direct a Marvel movie until we know what a plan B pay structure looks like. So to answer your question, there is not a great revealed number as far as transparency goes, but you can estimate that the companies are pocketing more money than they normally would have.
Yeah, okay. They haven't revealed much, and based on the reaction from directors and studios, it doesn't seem like they're getting much of a piece, if any.
Interesting.
Now, that being said, if we use Dune as an example, the director has come out and said that if Dune doesn't perform well in the box office, which we know can be a struggle right now, but Disney's experimentations with its release schedule is showing some success. That if Dune doesn't perform well in the box office, we're probably going to not get another one because of how much money went into it. But we now know that if it performs well on HBO Max, regardless of whether it's a success or not in the theater, that they will move forward with a sequel. So Warner Brothers is at least putting stock in HBO Max performance in that regard. So it's
really interesting that the sheer number of monthly subscribers for something like that could offset a poor box office performance enough to justify making a second one. It's really crazy when you think about it, but I mean, it makes sense. It's just the sheer amount of people that, especially when you have something as cheap as HBO Max, I think it's like $10 a month or something like that. Like, that's not bad to get access to prime time movies like this, even if it is 30 days later. I mean,
they don't make you pay a premium like Disney Plus does. Disney Plus, you have to pay $30 to watch the movie. So there's an upfront, cost and an extra boon to make up for lost theatrical release revenue. But with HBO Max, I don't know how they justify it or calculate it, because they just throw it on there.
I feel like it has to be tethered to trying to secure a month over month return, whereas like their big go-getters was like Game of Thrones, but everyone memed what they did, which was I wait till Game of Thrones comes out and then I enter into a free trial. I watch Game of Thrones and then I dip.
Yeah. So before we get too far away from this kind of talk, though, there are currently 67.5 million subscribers to HBO Max. That was actually from the end of July, so it may be a little bit more than that now. So to put that in perspective, 753,000 people watched Malignant. That is only 1.1% of the total subscribers watched this movie.
And just to think, if you wanted to be a subscriber to the Nerdosphere, it's just as cheap as $1 a month, and you get better content than Malignant.
Way better content. If you really think about it, though, 67.5 million subscribers, and it's kind of piggybacking off of what we've been talking about. Even their most successful numbers, which come from Mortal Kombat, it was only 5.5 million views. That's still a small percentage of their overall subscriber base. Like, what are these people watching on HBO? Like,
yeah,
Sopranos.
Yeah, I guess they just keep going back and watching Sopranos.
Yeah, because I don't know. It's I mean, I get a little bit frustrated sometimes with streaming services where it gets frustrating to have to be subscribed to X amount of different ones just to get exclusive content on each. Like one that recently pissed me off was Peacock taking over The Office, where The Office was just one of those. We mentioned Gabe earlier, but The Office is just one that I love to have on in the background while I'm doing stuff. And but I was like, man, I can't justify spending, even though it's only $5, I can't justify spending $5 a month to watch The Office in the background anymore. But it does get frustrating. But it goes back to, it's weird that you said that with Mortal Kombat only pulling in 5.5 million. It's like, obviously there's a lot of other people out there that have HBO Max for some odd reason that I don't have it for, because I'm there for the movies. And they're obviously not, which means I'm in the minority on this, because I'm with Malignant. It's less than 2% of the people that have HBO Max watch this. So it's weird.
Yeah. So strange. So it's a weird time we're living in. We all wanted to cut the cord so bad, and now they keep pulling us back in.
I guess, okay, let's get back to Malignant, because I feel like to give it justice what we've been talking about, I do think we need to spoil some of it, because I think there's some stuff that I would love to hear your guys' opinion on. So I don't know if now is a good time to talk about or give the spoiler warning.
But we'll give the spoiler warning now. So if you haven't watched Malignant and you have any interest in watching it at this point, after we just told you how well received it has been and how well received we thought about it, pause this, go watch it, come back. But if not, don't worry about it. We're just gonna spoil it for you now. So
I will also admit, I felt I was not lucid the entire time. I was going in and out of consciousness. And I remember there were a couple of moments where I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. Clayton, what's happening? And then he would explain what's happening. I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. I'm glad I woke up. But I do remember, I was awake. I was really awake for at least the first half of it. It was the latter half that I was going in and out. But there are numerous times where I would lean over, I would look over at Clayton, and I would be like, am I alone here? Does it feel like nothing's happening, but things are happening? Like there's no story. Like it's just like things are happening, but there's no reason as to why things are happening. I've never, and that's why I jokingly said, like, that's the most horrific thing about this movie, is I was so unsettled by the fact of what is going on? What is going on?
Yeah, you're left wanting to have something to grasp onto. You're like, every scene that there's something that could have been cool if explained properly and or built up to properly, you're like, oh, that could have been cool. And then you're like, but I don't know why it happened. Like, and then the people that the Gabriel is taking, like, why do I have any attachment to them? Like, what?
You don't.
You're like, oh, you got picked up as a tour guide in a basement. Who the fuck are you again? Like, why? And one, why are you being stupid enough to walk down a dark corridor? Who the fuck knows? You're literally living in a place that is supposedly haunted, and you're giving tour guides down there, and then you're going to walk down a dark corridor with no lights on. Makes a lot of sense. When you just unplug the light, I don't know. But anyways, And then can we talk about the fucking Matrix fight scene at the end of the movie that just doesn't make any sense at all? Like, how can her bones are backwards?
Yep.
How can you do what you're doing? You're moving better than I can, facing the incorrect way, operating in reverse.
Yeah.
Like and then that cheesy weird. Like, oh, it's been my body all along. If he could do it, I could do it.
I was waiting. Yeah, that was maybe the dumbest thing in the whole movie. When the sister's trapped under the hospital bed, and she's like, "No, you can't do it, no." And then the sister's, "It's been if he's done it this whole time, so can I."
And let's be honest here. I think they missed the best opportunity. The only shocked part that I had is when Gabriel shot the sister at the end, where that would have been enough for me to be like, okay, that was shocking. I wasn't expecting that. And then you reverse that because she made it up in her head and tricked Gabriel.
Yeah.
I was like,
very weird.
Oh, never mind. The only impactful death I cared about didn't actually happen.
Right. Yes.
So I don't know. It was just bizarre. So to kind of spoil it for everyone, we were talking about spoilers here. You find out that all of this the killer Gabriel, and I want to talk about a couple of things that just don't even remotely make sense as to how this happened. But you find out that Gabriel is a symbiotic twin that has been like absorbed and pushed into, I don't even remember the main girl's name.
It is Emily.
So like Emily had a conjoined twin on the back of her head that was really disgusting looking. And they were trying to figure out a way to essentially allow both of them to coexist together. And then they realized that Gabriel was a terrible influence on her and like corrupting her. Pretty much it was like a Voldemort situation where you had Voldemort on the back of this dude's head, influencing everything that they did and trying to kill people. So then they're like, oh, we're going to cut the cancer out. But they realized that if they cut Gabriel's brain out, it would also be cutting Emily's brain out. So they just stuff Gabriel's brain into Emily's body. And then within like the first like 5 minutes of the movie, the abusive boyfriend smashes Emily against a wall and cracks the back of her skull, which allows Gabriel to start showing back up in the world, which is also absurd. And let's be honest, if you crack somebody's skull hard enough, hitting them on the back of the head, how was that not one, permanent brain damage and or death? Like you heard the crack, like it gets shoved into the wall, plaster breaks, she's immediately bleeding, and now you're just left to believe that this evil twin's coming up. But anyways, there's a whole nother thing. How the fuck, so James Wann obviously realized that there was something inherently wrong with this, because then he had that weird scene where Gabriel, or whatever you want to call it, chased her up the stairs in that one really weird scene where like you almost felt like he was trying to force something there to put you off the trail, even though there was no trail to begin with, where like this shadow figure's chasing her up the stairs and you're like, oh my God, it's like a demon thing. And then you're like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, it was all in her head.
Figment of her imagination. It's all in her head. I don't know. It's weird to me. But yeah, it was a very frustrating movie because I wanted it to be good. I really did. I liked The Conjuring enough that I really wanted this to be good. I was like, I want to be scared. I want to watch a horror movie that's going to scare me. And I was like laughing halfway, like not even halfway.
We almost saw this in theaters.
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
And I am so happy.
It ended up being super hard to find some place to eat. So we ended up missing the showing that we were going to go see. And I'm so glad that we didn't, because I would have been so upset. But yeah, one of the most ridiculous things that you hadn't mentioned yet, Jesse, is the police, which Corbin teased earlier. We start off where the boyfriend or fiance, whatever, is killed. The police are kind of like suspecting her, but then they don't suspect her. And then she finds out she has this connection to the killer somehow, and they start using her as like a psychic, almost like consultant like you see in TV and shows. And then they start suspecting her again, but then Gabriel starts talking to them through the like electronics, and they're like, what's going on? Like it's back and forth and back and forth. And like Corbin said, they weren't even like really they didn't act at all like real police officers. It was so strange the way they talked and acted.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like how good of a police officer are you if there's a kidnapped, tied up person in the attic of the house that you've now spent hours in
Yes,
of
over
one of
and
the people
over
that you
they've
think is a
gone in this
suspect?
house. Yes, I forgot about that part too.
And she
Gabriel
like
had the lady in the roof or the attic the whole time.
yeah, I don't know. It's
And then of
the
course
whole
we
movie.
have one of the victims was the doctor that we saw in the beginning that was working on who we find out is Gabriel and Emily later on. And he takes one of her like medical awards and beats her to death with it, and then takes that back to his attic lair and takes it apart and turns it into like this knife, which becomes like the focal point of all these different shots. Like it felt to me like he was trying way too hard to establish like the next iconic like horror bad guy. So like he treated this knife in particular, this makeshift knife that we used to, it's like gold and fancy because it used to be a trophy, but he had it the focus and in weird places like a trophy or a throne kind of thing, and it felt like he's trying to make this like Jason or Michael Myers mask, or like Scream always has that kitchen knife, or
or like Freddy Krueger's claws. Like
exactly,
it had that exact feel where like
Yep.
you're forcing this.
Exactly. That's the first thing I thought of, and he just kept coming back to it. So, man, so bad.
I don't know. It's and then you touched on it earlier. The acting is atrocious. Like absolutely atrocious. And which is shocking to me because I've seen some of these people in some stuff that they're not this bad of actors or actresses. Like they're just not.
Yeah.
But then I don't know. It's just
one of the things I brought up too, Jesse, and I don't know if you'll vibe with this or not, but remember when The Happening came out? M. Night Shyamalan's movie, and everybody was super excited about it, and the acting was terrible, the story was weird, everybody was like, what is this? And then we find out later that was like the point to the movie, like it was supposed to be that way, but because M. Night never said that, like everybody took it super serious, and like it ruined his career for a while. I was like, maybe that's this for James Wann. Maybe it's supposed to be like this, and it's just not, because of the way they're marketing it. Everybody's going into it thinking this is, going to be super scary, but it's not meant to be. So like, that's my one defense, is maybe we're going to find out in 5-10 years that his intent was actually to be like super bad and self-aware, even though that didn't come across, and it was just marketed wrong.
Yeah, and maybe because I can get behind that, and that's what I wanted it to go one direction or the other. I wanted this to be a truly terrifying movie that was actually scary, or to go back to it, because it's kind of like, and I know I mentioned this in the last podcast I had with you guys. I wanted it to be similar to Fear Street, where Fear Street tapped into that campy feel that you kind of got from like the 80s horror films. It was a lot of fun, where you're not, never really was I freaked out by anything that happened in Fear Street, but I knew that that's what I was going to get going into it. So I appreciated it for what it was. And you're left wanting that in this one, and you don't get either. You get this like weird combination of him trying to be aware of the fact that he was almost trying to play like homage to the like showing off the weapon like you did. Oh, cool. That's what Michael Myers had with the machete or whatnot, or Jason, whoever has the machete. I don't even remember.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
What movie are you watching?
Is it Jason? Okay.
Yeah.
Where, so it's that type of thing where you're left wanting it to be that way and it's not. And then it's not scary either.
Yeah.
So you're just, Yeah, I just came away with it being like, so, and maybe we can wrap up here soon. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot else to say other than I came away wishing I had had my 2 hours back, is what I wished. Like I came away with it being like, I would have been happy not watching this.
Yeah. So my big thing is, we're all fans of horror here on the Nerdosphere. But as we get older and the more horror we see, the less likely it is to have an impact, at least for me. And and I was really looking forward, just based on the way it was marketed, that this one would somehow find a way to bring that scare back, to like make me nervous to watch a movie. I haven't felt nervous to watch a horror movie, in a decade, in 2 decades. So that's what I was really wanting from this movie, and we didn't get anywhere near that. So
yeah. I felt kind of a similar way. I was excited to have James Wan back in the horror genre. Really wanted to like it. I wanted to be scared, and this movie was just so bad. And I've talked to people, numerous people, who have said, "Oh, it's fun." I'm like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not even fun. It was just terrible.
So let me, I have a kind of a 2-part question for you guys, and maybe we can close out on this.
Perfect.
Name a film that has changed, because of your reaction there to what you just said, Corbin, with a couple people told you, oh no, it was fun. Has there been a movie that you have heard somebody say that and has completely reshaped your opinion of ever listening to anything they recommend ever again? Because I've had those before where people will be like, oh, that was a great movie. And you're like, okay, you said that. I have no faith that you have any idea what a good movie is. And I say that coming from the standpoint of understanding that there are entertaining films and then there are good, like, critic films. Like, there are 2 different subcategories, sure. But there are just some of them that I'm like, it doesn't even fall into either category. Like, this just was bad. So 1, do you have that? And then 2, something that you touched on earlier, Clayton, what was the last horror film you were actually a little bit nervous and or scared watching? I want to know.
Okay, so 1, when Tim said The Shining is scarier than Signs, I learned to never trust his opinion on anything ever again. That's right. I'm ripping this Band-Aid off. We're going into Spooktober. It's time to bring it back, baby. Tim was wrong. Tim wanted to die on this hill on how crazy I was to think that Signs is scarier than The Shining. I was like, Tim, The Shining isn't scary. He's like, what's more unsettling about losing your mind and killing your family? I was like, that can be unsettling, but it's not a scary movie, to the point where he opened up a poll in the Nerdosphere and it was a resounding Signs is scarier than The Shining. And Tim was like, well, the polls were wrong. Tim, that was in the era of the Nerdosphere where anytime Clayton and I disagree with Tim, he wanted to put it to a poll. And if the polls polled his way, he was like, see, it's what the people want. And if the polls didn't poll his way, he was like, I mean, the polls are not a great use for a metric because we're living in an echo chamber.
Oh, goodness.
Now, as for the second part of your question, it would depend on the release order, on which was released, I guess, latest, between Paranormal Activity 3 and the first Strangers. Those 2 movies were the last ones that just like, that fucking scared me.
Yeah, now that you said that, I'm pretty sure this came out before. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, because for a couple of different reasons. 1, with The Strangers, it perfectly encapsulates real life horror. Like, this is something that can happen. And the decisions the characters make aren't like crazy dumb that normally happen in like horror movies, where you're like, oh, I have to just like, I wouldn't have done that, but it's a horror movie or whatever. Like, that made me scared to go to like my grandparents' house in the middle of nowhere. Or if like someone's like, hey, I got a home, do you want to go stay in it? I'm like, maybe not. And also made me scared to go on vacation with an ex-fiance. That probably is the scariest thing.
Yeah.
And then with Paranormal Activity 3, I love that style of horror. I love like demonic shit, like that stuff. Like, it always gets me, probably because I grew up Christian. So there will always be a piece of my core that believes that to an extent. And that's why maybe it freaks me out. But with each Paranormal Activity movie, they tried to change a scare mechanic. So the first one was just found footage. Great. The second gimmick and the second one was utilizing home security systems and using those around the home. Now, in the third movie, the scare mechanic they used was the boyfriend, to get a better view of what was going on, put the camera on a rotating fan. And the moment he did that, I go, fuck me. This is going this, they're going to, and they did. I was like, this is so unnerving because it does all the tension for you. Like the plot itself had a really nice buildup, but the fact that anytime you went to that camera, it was moving, you just found yourself becoming more and more tense because you're like, what is going to happen?
Yeah. They have really good sound design in those movies too. Like when the ghost is doing stuff, it really just like hits you in the chest. So for the first question, there has definitely been moments in my life where I've thought, I cannot believe you like this, but I can't think of anything specific at this point. I want to say, Corbin, that Nick Lanham had some opinions that made me think this. I love you, Nick. I do. You're my boy. But I feel like there were some opinions that he put forth that maybe I thought about that. So, but I still value his opinion, so I guess maybe that doesn't answer the question. As far as the second one, the first movie, I completely agree with The Strangers and Paranormal Activity 3. The Strangers, I was super scared to watch. I actually watched it by myself for the first time at my home because I didn't actually see it in theaters. Let me tell you, that was a terrible experience. But Paranormal Activity 3, Corbin and I and Nick all saw in theaters together, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And that was a nerve-wracking experience as well. But the first movie that I remember feeling like super nervous about, not only watching it but rewatching it, was 28 Days Later. This movie came out in between my sophomore and junior year of high school. I was a fairly innocent high schooler, especially in freshman and sophomore year, and I hadn't seen a whole lot of horror at that time. And 28 Days Later, as most of everyone knows, is super intense. It was the new take on zombies with the rage virus and them running after you and just being so super intense. The transformation happens so fast. All you have to do is get like a little bit of blood, like anywhere in, like on a cut or in your eye, and you transform. So it was not only scary to watch it, but the idea of rewatching it made me nervous for a long time. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny that because The Strangers was one that I was going to list as well. It's the only movie I have ever actually screamed in the theater over. I was watching it. I was there with like 4 of my friends, and my dad was actually there. And when that dude shows up in the sliding glass window in the house, I was like, oh, fuck me. It just taps into something where you're like, that scenario would be so absolutely fucking terrifying.
And they do in that movie, they do a good job at building like tense moments without overly like being on the nose. Like when she walks away the first time asking if Tamara is home, the guy like looks over and then screws the light bulb in. And so you're already like, as an audience member, are starting to piece together like what these people are doing off screen to create these moments, where I was like, yeah, it's just so good.
It was the psychological terror behind the actual horror of the film that was so intense, where you're like, they're just toying with these people because they know that they have them absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
And it was shocking. So it was good. That one was one. And then one that I don't think, it didn't get me for the same reason that The Stranger did, but I got pretty unsettled with Get Out as well. Get Out was one and that's a newer one. But the story behind Get Out is just very creepy, where that whole thing is a little bit unsettling, but it's different. It's not the same style of horror. I would count that more of a thriller, I guess, than horror. Probably
thriller.
Yeah. It's funny though. We all said The Strangers. I know that one of Tim's coworkers who listens to the podcast ended up watching The Strangers for the first time after hearing us talk about it, and they had mentioned that I think they had a hard time even finishing the movie. So if you have not seen the original Strangers, definitely go see it. Wear a diaper with yourselves though while you do it, so that way you don't have to worry about getting up and dying on your way to the bathroom.
Yep. Yes.
And then I wanted to shout out real quick before we sign off here. Wanted to shout out, if you are looking for some kind of like fun, like say you watched Malignant like we did, and you're left wanting something that maybe taps into a light-hearted or more like campy-ish style horror film that I think is worth watching and a lot of fun, is Drag Me to Hell. It came out in 2009 and it's a dark comedy. And it is so funny. Like I say funny because it like has its like moments where you're a little bit spooked by it. It has one of my like, I can't say he's one of my favorite actors, but he's a lot of fun to watch and stuff. Is Justin Long.
Doesn't age, man.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. It's a, like I said, dark comedy. It's what I wish this had gone to, Malignant. And then I will also throw Cabin in the Woods out there. If you have not seen either of those are definitely worth diving into. Like if you're left wanting maybe something that isn't going to like scare your pants off type thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think Sam Raimi did Drag Me to Hell.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah, Sam Raimi did. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. I thought of that when I don't remember what one of you guys said that made me think about it, but I was like, I have to remember what this is. It's worth going back to watch, and it's a little bit different than, because it's not horror per se. It's labeled as that, but I don't think I would count either of them as like atypical horror. Like they go a completely different route, but they're so much fun to watch.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. All right, folks. Well, that does it for this week's The Nerdosphere. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Malignant, the continuing impact and importance of theatrical releases, and our thoughts on horror in general. If you like what we do and you're on an Apple device, scroll down and give us a 5-star rating. If you're not on an Apple device, that's okay. You can help by sharing our podcast. I guarantee if you like our stuff, you know somebody that does. And what makes content better? Sharing with those you care about. If you really love what we do, visit us over at patreon.com/thenerdosphere, where you can help keep the show going and join the Nerdosphere family with exclusive perks like the patron-exclusive podcast Nerd Tea, where we discuss random normal things for 15 minutes at a time each episode, so you get to know us a little bit more. Until next time, we'll see you. Bye-bye!
Adios.
Toodaloo.
All right, boys. YouTube audience, thank you very much for tuning in. There was a little bit of chatter, but nothing that we need to address, except that Corbin's mustache got a compliment.
Who would you compliment?
It was my buddy Sean. He's been a buddy of mine for like, I don't know, 15 years or something like that now.
Gotcha.
He had trouble putting in a hot dog emote, then put in a ton of hot dog emotes, and then complimented your mustache. So thank you, Sean, for that.
Appreciate that very much.
Hot dog.
YouTube,